Hello and welcome to Scy'kadia 101, presented by HexEd Oz, where the sexiest thing you can be is a massive nerd. In this episode, I'll be discussing the broad basics of the various playable species at Scy'kadia, the LARP game I've been running for almost a decade. Down the line, I plan to delve into these species individually, going into deeper detail, discussing the differences between them and their counterparts in classic D&D and fantasy fiction as a whole, and offering advice on how to portray them, both in costuming and acting choices. I've decided to release these Scy'kadia-focused specials in tandem with more general LARP topics, partly because most of my present listeners are people in the Aussie LARP community, many of whom are also Scy'kadians. Additionally, as the creator of a large chunk of Scy'kadia's lore, I think I deserve to dote on the setting from time to time. And if you're not into that, absolutely no problem. I'll catch you for the next regular episode. That said, if you're still here, honestly, thank you so much. Let's begin. Firstly, why limit playable species at all? Why doesn't Scy'kadia allow players to just rock up as whatever they want? The first reason is promotion of cohesion. Our style of LARPing is very reliant on interaction and forming bonds with fellow players. And as I've stated in a previous episode, people tend to coalesce around points of commonality. While we want to allow players some choice and variety, we still want new participants to enter the setting and instantly have some idea of who they can relate to at a glance. Oh wow, it's my first day, and this LARP thing is kinda scary. Oh, but hey, that girl has the same green skin and tusks as me. Maybe I can ask her for some advice. The second reason is narrative style. Some games, particularly occult or sci-fi themed, like to lean hard into the concept of the unknown. They intend for players to feel wrong-footed or lost, strangers in a strange place up against alien challenges. In traditional medieval fantasy, a little mystery is awesome, like lost kingdoms and whodunit scenarios, but you want folks to feel like their character is grounded in the setting, generally able to recognize things happening around them. Everyone knows what an elf is, what a dwarf is, and in keeping with species that are largely influenced by D&D and games like Elder Scrolls, we ensure that players are only confused by what they see around them some of the time. Mostly. Thirdly, once you start branching out from the common humanoid species you'd expect to find in D&D, you start getting into monstrous characters like gnolls, centaurs, creatures that require a lot of often cumbersome costuming to be convincing. And in Australia, where our games are set, the sun is a harsh and unforgiving mistress. Wearing what amounts to a fursuit or a giant puppet is likely to lead to dehydration, heat stroke, and other problems that we want to avoid. In fact, the only playable species we have that require that level of costuming is shifters. But 1, they look like regular humanoids most of the time. And 2, we rarely if ever put plot into the game that would force them to transform into their bestial state, unless we're in the colder part of the year. You're welcome, shifters. Finally, ease of interaction with in-game mechanics. Some objectives, rituals, and relics only function for players of certain species, giving them some time in the spotlight and making their choice during character creation feel important. By limiting players to certain species, we ensure that writing "undead only" on an instruction tag will allow at least a handful of our players to interact with that thing. It also keeps our job as storytellers simpler and helps to make sure we don't put anything into the game that can't be interacted with. As a bonus, writing "undead" means that several people will get to use that piece of the plot, whether a certain intended player is in attendance or not. If we were to write something in for just one player's made-up species, one that no one else is playing, we then run the risk that they get sick, go on vacation, or just forget to attend, and now we have a prop, or a plotline, or some NPCs maybe, just kind of collecting dust on the field. Massive time waster. Those are the big reasons. Others include personal preference, wanting to tone down the special snowflake approach that some games allow for, but enough about justifications. Let's just get to the meat and potatoes, precious. Here now, the playable species of Scy'kadia. 1. Humans. Humans are, ironically, a staple of most fantasy worlds. So too for Scy'kadia, as they are arguably the most numerous species, and the best choice for players who can't be arsed wearing prosthetics, fake beards, or face paint. Most of Scy'kadia is ruled by humanity, which has split itself over the millennia into an assortment of realms, each inspired by real-world history and folklore. The humans of Arcos are farmers and woodsmen, lorded over by knightly, lords, and ladies and even lieges. The humans of Frail are an eclectic mix of desert nomads, monster-hunting jungle tribes, and palace-dwelling alchemists. No two groups of humans are ever entirely alike, for the species adapts much faster than their inhuman neighbours. It's worth noting that due to human saturation, other bipedal species are oft referred to as humanoid and compared to humanity in regards to their physiology and behaviours. Humans come in all shapes, sizes and shades and usually live to the ripe old age of 60 to 80, with some exceptions. Humans are also the only species capable of interbreeding with elves and orcs, though why this should be the case is a mystery. In regards to their thoughts on religion and magic, humans tend to be pious in ways reflective of their vocation. A gambler might pray to Rillian, the god of trickery and luck, while any sailor who wishes to avoid a watery death will offer a drop of blood to Nereid and Neroid, twin goddesses of the sea, right before a voyage. All but a few human realms revile and fear magic, not only for its innate dangerous nature, but because humanity was once enslaved by sorcerer warlords during a period called the Time of Mage Blight. The surviving realms were largely formed by those folk who overthrew their arcane oppressors, and hundreds of years later, resentment still simmers. Human mages are often ostracized, hunted, or they flee and become adventurers. 2. High Elves. In stark contrast to humanity, High Elves are the chosen people of magic itself, which they call Tealu, the soul of Geth, and they tend to pick up spellcraft with ease. Once rulers of a vast empire, Scy'kadia's elves now live in small reclusive communities, often in forests within human realms, such as Greenfang Forest in Arcos. Within their secretive enclaves, elves live in symbiosis with magic, uncaring of non-elven concerns beyond their borders. Their extremely long lives make them seem aloof and introspective to other species, though their ethereal beauty and reputation for sorcery can also make them quite intimidating. Given their connection to magic, elves rarely worship the greater gods, though they admit a respect for nature deities such as Gaulur the Green Ancient. There is a sadness that hangs upon the remaining children of elfdom, for not only are they a diminished power in the world, there are places like the bazaars of Maphatepsis where elves are actually sold as slaves and curiosities. 3. Fallen Elves. Centuries ago, during what is known as the War of Burning Leaves, elves in Greenfang Forest, bitter over the loss of their empire, began dabbling in hellish malfeasance. Doing so slowly eroded their connection to Tealu, and as the war drew to a close, the discontented warlocks were banished from their home and named the Exiled. These fallen elves made new homes for themselves in the misty Feyring Isles, in the deep deserts of Frail, the bitter north of Vilkland, or even just on the decks of Reaver fleets. The ruinous sorcery spread to them by their ancestors changes the younger generations of Fallen, turning their flesh an assortment of unnatural colours to better blend with their environments. Feyring Islanders are grey-blue like the mists. Freylite Fallen are often golden-skinned, the better to hide among the dunes, while those in the furthest north are pale as ice. While they no longer hold magic's favour and instead draw on sorcery from the Nine Hells, the Fallen don't worship the Demon Lords. Oh no, they're too proud for that. They tell themselves they are simply using demonic power, like a tool they can discard. Yet, for all their claims to not be corrupted, they are still a wicked and selfish people, actively seeking out power and slaves from what they deem lesser species. 4. Half-Elves. Where a true elf can live for over 1500 years, a half-elf lives for mere centuries. In this, they also mature quicker than elven children, but slower than human children, meaning no matter where they're brought up, they always feel disconnected or even left behind by their peers. In half-elves, the long view of an elf is usually wedded to the urgency of human ambition, making them excellent mediators and advisors in spite of the separation they feel. It's worth noting that half-elves in human society are treated with a degree of suspicion due to their relation to their sorceress kin, yet they do not share the close bond with magic that high elves possess. In fact, half-elves are just as likely to shun magic as practice it, and might even lean hard into worship of the gods to better connect with their human side. 5. Orcs. Scy'kadian orcs are thick-skinned, tusked, greenish brutes, and contenders with humanity for most populous species. Valuing strength and endurance above just about everything, except maybe food and spoils, orcs tend to live in the harshest environments: jagged mountain ranges, sweltering jungles, and freezing plains. They migrate in enormous war hordes, taking what they need from those too weak to stop them, and are widely considered an existential threat by every other species. Part of what makes orcs so terrifying is also their open worship of the Naga or demon lords. Thousands of years ago, Zorg, the god of the orcs, waged war against the demons on behalf of his mortal followers. But, it is said, he was beaten and devoured. Thus, given that orcs value strength, is it really any wonder they turned their fealty to the beings responsible for their god's demise? There are, of course, those rare few orcs who still pray to lost Zorg, hopeful for his resurrection, though they keep their prayers quiet, lest a bigger Naga-worshipping orc put them in their place. As for magic, their habit of drawing on hellish power for obvious reasons tends to make orc sorcerers incredibly dangerous, while also leaving them mutated and insane, so the rest of the horde usually keep them at arm's length. Or better yet, chained up until needed. 6. Half-orcs. It's a sad fact, but half-orcs, much like half-elves, rarely fit in with the people around them. Not only are they sometimes the result of unsavory encounters, and kept at a distance because of it, they are considered untrustworthy, dull-witted monsters by human colleagues, and soft targets by orc bullies. Being in truth neither dull-witted nor especially weak, at least when compared to a regular human, half-orcs, when given a chance, can make for exceptional workers, soldiers, and even adventurers, and tend to live longer than standard orcs, because their human tendency to consider things rather than immediately try to test themselves against danger means they receive less lethal wounds on average. 7. Goblins. Perhaps because of their shared greenish skin tones, pointed ears, and sharp teeth, goblins often find themselves swept up by orc hordes and forced into a servile role. There, they survive the interactions with their much bigger patrons through a mixture of cunning, willingness to grovel, and mutual worship of the Naga. Influenced by both the demons and general orc behaviour, goblins are more often cruel than kind, and even when a tribe avoids becoming little better than orc slaves, they still prey on others, particularly undefended travellers or people they can outnumber, preferably at night, while they're sleeping. Goblins are lovers of tricks and will incorporate all sorts of ingenious, spiteful traps into their lairs. 8. Dwarves. The bearded folk, some call them, or the stout ones, for all dwarves are short and stocky, and even some of the most feminine dwarves possess glorious facial hair. Another long-lived species, though not quite so long as elves, dwarves spend their years honing various craft-related skills such as metalwork or gem cutting, and honouring their ancestors. They are a proud people, whose beleaguered subterranean holds have stood for millennia against constant assault by orcs, undead, and more monsters than we could possibly name in a single episode. Alas, not all such holds survive, and this has led the remaining dwarves to become insular to an extreme, or it's forced them to take to the road, earning their keep through superior manufacturing in the towns and cities of humanity. Now, dwarves don't just dislike or fear magic, they openly hate it. They deem it a lazy and dangerous exercise, one reserved for fools without the skill or wisdom to make things by hand and with good, honest, well-earned sweat. This is an opinion shared by their god, Fundun, the chained smith, who sometimes grants his priests protection from foul hexcraft. 9. Halflings. Looking like a miniature human but with large, pronounced feet, halflings are a whimsical people who travel from place to place in closely knit clans, absorbing facets of various cultures while making them their own. With a little twist, of course. Much like goblins, but without the hurtful edge, halflings enjoy mundane tricks, and for this they are sometimes mislabeled as thieves or saboteurs, though they are certainly beloved by the trickster god Rillian, to whom many of them will make an occasional offering. When not travelling, halflings will put down roots in human or dwarven settlements, becoming a source of mirth and bewilderment for their larger neighbours. 10. Gnomes. Similar to halflings, gnomes are small, but possess long elf-like ears and often sport elaborate facial whiskers. They're also more likely than halflings to study spellcraft, as they delight in magical displays, particularly illusions, and seem to possess an innate bravery concerning magic. They usually live in underground burrows, where an elderly burrowhead acts as the overall rule-maker for the family or families dwelling there. Despite having no more than the usual connection to magic, gnomes have been known to revere it by the elven name of Tealu, a fact that endears them to elves that might dwell nearby and witness this taking place. 11. Pixies. So pixies weren't originally a playable species in Scy'kadia. They're in fact an addition pushed for by our awesome players. In their natural state, pixies are absolutely tiny, living in chaotic, free-spirited woodland societies, sometimes formed around founts of raw magic called Loki. As you might expect with beings that live right on arcane leaks, pixies are very commonly practitioners of spellcraft, weaving enchantments around their homes like humans would simply hang curtains. Each season, pixie gatherings elect a pair of honorary leaders who take for themselves outlandish titles like the Twilight Queen of Gooseberries, and it's their duty to treat with outsiders, though not much else is asked of them. Like I said, pixies are pretty scattered critters. Now obviously our players can't be expected to fit in the palm of a hand, so we excuse their height as follows. Pixie adventurers are generally what we refer to as bigged. They've been cursed or maybe cast the wrong sort of spell, and this has made them sprout to abnormal size, making them a danger to their families. Thus, they are sent out into the world to find a cure for their bigness, or just to find a place they can now belong. Oh, super important point? Pixies have wings, though bigged pixies often cannot use them to fly. 12. Undead. There are necromancers in Scy'kadia capable of puppeting corpses or ensnaring sinister wraiths, but playable undead are a whole other matter. They're not just animated flesh. By some twist of dark arcana, perhaps a miscast ritual, their soul has been trapped inside their own dead body, and they must now find some way to embrace their new unlife. Some undead are grotesque rotting ghouls, dwelling in old catacombs or the sewers of human realms. Others are hauntingly beautiful bloodsuckers, sticking to the shadows of palace ballrooms. Regardless, the undead are loathed by all living souls, largely because of an event called the Faraday War. The Faraday Union was a human culture ruled by liches and other undead masters, and for over 100 years it swept Scy'kadia with plagues and shambling armies in an effort to subjugate all mortal life. There are humans alive today whose grandparents fought in the war, and the mightiest nations are still recovering from it. Add to that the known fact that only ruinous sorcery can create undead, and it becomes obvious why so many would rather see them burn than give them a chance to prove themselves an exception. So, undead dwell all across Scy'kadia, but never in large groups outside of a place called the Crosslands, and even there, they hide from the living. It should also come as no surprise that many undead take up necromancy, and avoid drawing any attention from the gods, particularly Kree, the doorman, who teaches his followers that what is dead should stay dead. 13. Shifters. More of a curse than an actual species, during the time of Mage Blight, evil wizard kings used magic to merge humanoids with predatory beasts to make devastating living weapons and elite trackers. Centuries later, the original experiments are all gone, but their descendants hide in plain sight. They look just like regular humanoids, until the blood moon grows full, at which point they transform into violent, rage-filled berserk monsters, unable to stop themselves from killing anyone they come across. Shifters deal with their curse in a number of ways. Some lock themselves in a soundless basement when the time comes, others head out into the wild, and just hope they can get far enough away that their bestial form won't simply smell its way back to their village. By necessity, shifters are often on the move, hopping from place to place, and trying to avoid the notice of monster hunters and others who would, rightfully, many say, seek to destroy them. In their blood moon shape, most shifters are distinctly canine, with some looking like enormous hunting cats or even bears. Rumours do speak of shifters with other animalistic traits, reptilian, even avian, but these are exceptionally rare if they exist at all. Meaning that to play one, you need storyteller permission, and an exceptionally good reason, as the mechanics we employ for the moon form can't accurately portray such beings. 14. Elementari. Elementals are spirits of nature that swim through magic itself. They're dimly aware of the physical world and able to influence aspects of it that relate to their element. A fire elemental might make a campfire burn hotter, for example. Yet sometimes these elementals take note of mortal goings-on, and they desire to be a part of it all. They form bodies from things related to their element. A water elemental might form a body of ice, for example, while an earth elemental might forge a body of rock and trace metals. In their physical state, they are called elementari, and they lose their innate ability to mold their element beyond simply holding themselves together. In fact, while they do learn spellcraft quickly, so long as the spell in question corresponds to their element, the fact that they must learn to cast spells at all is often a shock to them. Much like a newborn, the elemental will have to learn much, from language to manners, to actually achieve their goal of interacting with mortals. And given their magical nature, outside of realms like Loque, it's debatable if mortals are even going to want to interact with them back. There are 5 types of elementari, those of fire, water, earth, air, and life. Life elementari are actually, on close inspection, some of the creepiest, in my opinion, because while they might look like fauns or dryads, fey and even beautiful, their body is not a natural construct. If it is flesh and blood, it's only because the elemental incorporated flesh and blood from something into its form, usually alongside plant matter, leading to vines for hair or thorny antlers. 15. Cambions. Cambions are the unfortunate offspring of a mortal and a demon. Given that demons don't just freely walk the earth, many cambions result from a pact sworn by an individual or a cult who summoned a messenger of the Naga. Marked by demonic traits like horns, hellish runic markings, even a barbed tail sometimes, cambions not raised as a messianic figure within a secreted cult must prepare themselves for a life on the extreme outskirts of mortal society. After all, demons are pure evil, shards of magic driven insane. And who, given the overall distrust of magic in general, would look upon a cambion and not see a threat? Some Cambions, driven by hatred for the judgmental world around them, do swear themselves to the Nine Hells and wield ruinous spellcraft with destructive abandon, content to just lash out at anyone and everyone they can. Others try extra hard to resist the call of their demonic blood, which does urge them to commit evils. They instead turn to faith in the greater gods or set off to fight other evils in atonement for their own birth. 16. Nephilim. Much like Cambions, Nephilim are the children of mortals and otherworldly beings, though in this case, one parent is a celestial, effectively an angel. Each of the greater gods has their own kind of celestials, from the Myrrh of the Twins to the Cryptari of Kree, and each is reflective of the god or goddess and their aspects. So too are Nephilim. A Nephilim with a Solari mother might have gleaming golden hair and eyes as though sunlight is trapped inside them. A Nephilim with a Sylvanite parent might bear markings like the walls on a tree and find themselves followed around by stray animals. Unlike Cambions, Nephilim are generally treated with reverence, well cared for, but also expected to go on to perform great deeds, and that enormous weight of expectation can turn them from a divine path towards a much darker road. There are also Nephilim who choose heroism, but turn from the god of their celestial parent, instead gaining favor with another deity, simply wishing to prove that, in the end, they decide their own fate, not some distant force pulling their strings. And that's the playable species of Scy'kadia. Again, I am hoping to cover them in more detail at a later stage, but for now, I hope this has sparked some inspiration for your own LARP character, whether Scy'kadian or medieval fantasy in general. Until we meet again, I've been Chris, this has been Hex Ed Oz, don't forget to like and share if you enjoyed yourself, and I'll see you real soon. Bye!